Just getting started here. How's everyone today? Welcome, welcome. Please read the show notes and let me know if you have any questions. Put them in chat with a question mark so they show up in bold. Good morning. Welcome, welcome. So, this is my walk and talk seller chat. So, not selling fabric this morning, just chatting and talking about selling on whatnot. And so, everyone who is a seller wanting to sell, thinking about selling. I don't have all the answers, but I can show you where you can get them. No, I have a lot of cheat sheets and help and things that you can look for, and then official sources that you can go to get some help are in the show notes. All the official websites and links to places are in the show notes. So make sure you check the show notes and get any of those things in there that you need. So, for example, the starred bullets. Have I ever sold books on here? Do you think I should set up the shipping a certain way? Any tips having my first all book show soon? So the main thing about selling books is the answer is yes, but very limited as far as my experience goes. Is that you make sure you schedule it under the category of books and that you list everything as books, because that's what triggers the automatic media rate depending on how much they buy. So if they only buy one book or two books or maybe even three, depending on the weight of the books, it will automatically calculate based on media rate. Um, so then you want to give them that savings. And then once it hits a certain weight, then it ends up being cheaper for them to just do the 921, 1 to 5 pounds rate. And then, 5 pounds and over, it depends on which is a which is more cost effective, media or ground advantage, and usually ground advantage wins. So I would have my settings set for 1 to 5 pounds priority or priority flat rate, either way, whichever one you want to go with, and then 5 pounds and over, ground advantage, and then buyer pays all unless you want to take the risk that you have a couple of people that buy a ton of books. Then put your buyer pays max 921. But if you do buyer pays max 921, I feel like personally it's to your advantage to always do flat rate on 1 to 5 and 5 and over. Because then you, as the seller, no matter how much they buy, you only have to pay 921. And then you can use some of your adjustments to, you know, unbundle or put it in a larger package, anything people buy over the 5 pound mark. But you only had to pay the difference between 921 and whatever it is for the new one. Or if you've used all of your adjustments, then you're only paying for the extra. Does that make sense? So that was a long explanation. All right. Let's see. Do you have an ideal setup for selling fabric as far as phone, laptop, etc. for a show later this month? I mean, honestly, whatever amount of space you need to be able to show the fabric in a way that is going to, be able to see, you're going to be able to see it well, and then have the space you need to move things around. And I would use the phone as the camera, obviously. That's always your best option, to use your cell phone as the camera. Unless you go out and spend thousands of dollars on some kind of professional um, digital streaming camera, your cell phone has the best camera. and then use a secondary device to run your show, another cell phone, an iPad. I prefer to use a laptop because the web version of the software has a lot more tools that you can use to see things in a broader, in a bigger screen, and you can change between different views. I prefer to use the web version to run my show. But yeah, lighting, sound, space, you just have to kind of configure what's going to work for you and what space you have. So yeah, you're welcome. And that's exciting. So flat rate across the board for shipping and max shipping $9.21 question mark. It depends on, let me see, Sunshine. It depends on what you sell and what is going to work for what you sell. So Sunshine, you're saying you're going to sell books. If you think most of the books that you're going to sell will fit in flat rate if they buy a bunch, I'd stick with flat rate and max 921 because it's going to do media rate until the media rate is more expensive than flat rate. That makes sense. And then, so if they only want buy one book or two books, then they get media rate because it's just automatically calculated based on weight, based on where they live away from you. And media rate is the cheapest, but it only stays cheapest if they don't hit too much weight. All right, Love Lace or Lovely CE. Thinking about selling, what do I need for post office labels and receipts? Also boxes and shipping bags. How does this work? So you need to come to my show on Friday. That is on my schedule. I'll give you a couple of things today, but if you look at my schedule on Friday, we're going to be doing this show called Don't Sink Your Shipping. And I'm actually going to have all the boxes out. I'm going to walk you through the whole process, show you the screens, all that good stuff. So you'll definitely want to be there or be in some of the other shows that are doing shipping shows this month. And I failed to get the link in here that I had in my other shows that all of the community support team are doing shipping shows about shipping. And so if you message me after this show, I'll send you that link. And it's just a link to everybody's show that's left for the rest of this month, who's going to talk about shipping. But the key with shipping is you need to know how to do the shipping based on what you sell. So this document that I just pinned called Choosing Basic Shipping Settings is kind of it walks you through verbally, okay, if this is what you sell and it asks you some questions, then probably you're going to want to use this method. So kind of just pull that up by tapping the picture, tap it again, make it big like this, take a screenshot, read through it. That'll kind of guide you. And then I have on my YouTube account, if you look in my show notes, second paragraph is my YouTube channel. All of my lives are streamed multicast, so they're saved on YouTube under my lives. So you can go to my YouTube account and under the lives, you can find all of these shows. And if you look, I've done 3 other shows called Don't Sink Your Shipping. So those have the same kind of information, and then we'll do the one on Friday. All right. Good morning, Sass Mom. How are you today? Welcome in. All right, let me filter for questions here really quick. Old Bliss says, Dana, when you were at the Whatnot meetings, did they mention when they are going to give sellers a better option for shipping, such as UPS? They didn't specifically talk about that, but they did talk about it earlier this year. And It's definitely something they're investigating, but to be honest, I don't know that that will really change a whole lot for everybody because if you think about it, the postal service is still actually the cheapest. And unless they were to be able to negotiate something better, I think the only thing that it would improve possibly is being able to send larger items. Because the postal service does have, pretty strict limits on that, on size. It gets pretty pricey, and there are some other options with some of the other carriers where it's a little less expensive for the larger bulky items. But yeah, I don't really think they feel like it's that big of a priority because even though it seems like maybe that would be better, the way that shipping is across the board right now, there's really not a lot of good alternatives. The post office gives us the most flexibility, the cheapest rates, and it goes everywhere. It goes everywhere. And not everybody has access in rural areas to go to a FedEx drop off or go to a UPS drop off, whereas everybody has access to the post office usually. So I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something they're exploring and looking at. Do you know if you can sign up for a business credit card as an online seller? Are we considered a true business? Well, I can't answer that for you from the perspective of is someone going to give you a business credit card? But yeah, you're a real business. And especially you should have, depending on what state you live in, if you get a business license, which you probably should, that's considered a business. And also, you can explore whether you need to get an LLC or an S corp or something like that through, with your talk to your accountant. Because I think it really just depends on how much you're making. Because if you're just under that threshold of, a couple of thousand where the IRS isn't going to really give a crap, maybe you don't need to go to those lengths. But yeah, and I'll be honest though with you, I don't even have a business credit card right now because they really don't, from my experience having them before, they really don't give you any big advantage. And they honestly sometimes charge more, have some kind of fee, yearly fee. Um, I use a credit card that just gives me cash back or some kind of points back because then I use that for everything I spend and in it from a, it just gives me a better advantage. So, but yes, you are a legit business, as long as you're making enough. Carolyn, do you include the weight of the shipping package in the product weight? I have leaflets that weigh 2 ounce, but have to use a rigid miller to prevent bending. So the answer to that, yes, Carolyn, yes. So if the item that you're selling only weighs 1 to 2 ounces, but what you have to mail it in is going to make it weigh 8, then what you need to be selling at is 8 ounce. So, like if you sell little fragile things that you have to bubble wrap and put in a box, you need to account for the weight of all the bubble wrap, paper, box. So, yes, you do need to include the weight of the shipping. Keeping in mind, however, that if they buy multiples of that item, the way Whatnot's bundling works, it may or may not be. I mean, you need to try and put it as close as you can, but still try to not overcharge shipping. So, it kind of gets tricky there because, if you can send 2 of them in the same rigid mailer as you could have sent one and it really is the same weight, it's a little bit unfair to the customer to charge them a pound of shipping if you had it at 8 ounces with the mailer, but it could actually still be right, it'd be like 9 ounces instead. So you may want to consider doing a custom shipping profile on that item where you have 1 to 2 ounces, and then with the packaging it's 8, but you use a custom profile that's called rigid mailer. Let's say you call it rigid mailer, and then it allows up to 3 additional of the same item in that rigid mailer before it hits a pound or before it flips to the next weight, because you don't want to overcharge shipping. So make sure you figure out how custom shipping profiles work and use those to your advantage and to your customers' advantage to try and be more exact on your shipping weight. All right, let me filter for questions again here. All right, let's see. Sunshine was thinking about doing a fill box of books, kind of a thing, but not sure if that was a good idea. No, I think that's probably a good idea, especially if the books that you have are not necessarily like old, rare, collectible, and it's just mainstream books. It is harder probably to sell one at a time and get a big enough audience in that category. But if you're doing boxes full, um, it attracts more buyers who want to, try and go through and then resell those books individually. And the thing to be careful about with doing a fill a box show of any kind of merchandise is that you have to have your settings set so that it charges per box. So you're going to want to use a custom shipping profile and only have, one or two listings, depending on if you want to use 1 or 2 different sizes of flat rate box. And then your custom profile that you use is set up so that it only allows 1 per box. So each box that you sell, it charges them $9.21, and then you have the buyer pays max set to buyer pays all, so that you aren't, because otherwise you would pay the extra on every box they buy. So you would have it set for the cost is buyer pays all, and then have it set for flat rate, flat rate. And if you're just doing a box full, then have, a large flat rate box as your listing, custom shipping profile, and then have it set for flat rate on both 1 to 5 and 5 and over. And probably have your weight of your box set for, maybe fill one and see approximately what it weighs to fill a box, and then use that as your, weight. Because as long as it's under 70 pounds and you've got flat rate turned on both, it's fine. All right, so let's see. How do I make a preview video with music added and have it available to preview a show? A preview video with music added and have it available to preview a show. Are you talking about adding a video to your thumbnail? I think that's what you're asking. So when you create a show, you have the option to add a video. So to show you that, I'm just going to pull up a show. So today, here's my show for today, later today. And if I open that show and click the 3 dots right there, see 3 dots, and then hit edit show. So next to your thumbnail, you have a place where you can add a video, right? So you just create a video. It needs to be less than about 30. It needs to be less than 30 seconds. It can't be have too much in there that makes the size of it too big to put on there. I honestly use TikTok. I take a little video with my phone, and then I go on TikTok, and TikTok adds, you can add music and effects and fonts and all kinds of stuff. That's what I use. And then save it on TikTok, and then it saves it, downloads it to your phone, and then you can use that same video on your show. So when I have videos on my shows, that's what I've done. Because TikTok does all the other stuff for you automatically, and you don't have to use some kind of fancy editing software to make videos. So then you just add that video and update, and it'll be on your show. You're welcome. All right. And if you don't use TikTok, you can use the little iMovie, although the iMovie makes them smaller on your phone if you have iPhone. Just use whatever, video editing. You can use Canva and create little videos, and do stuff on there as well. But that one, I don't think you can add music on Canva. If you can, it's pretty limited. So yeah, TikTok works great for me. All right, let's see. Okay, so we are selling on other platforms. Today, for example, I shipped 12 boxes. UPS was the cheapest by an average of $4. Yeah, on other platforms where you have some options, sometimes UPS is cheaper. But with the 921 on Whatnot, with that rate, it's pretty tough to find anything cheaper than that. So, but yeah, I feel like we do need some other options if we have items that are harder to ship and pack. So I agree with that. So, but you shipped stuff from it on a different platform though, right? So, yeah. But I still feel like if someone buys a single item that's more fragile, is 921 higher than what you would have spent on a different platform to send that same item? If it's over a pound? Because there are some, because Ground Advantage is cheaper, but you can always set your customs for over 5 and do Ground Advantage. And then it might be a little bit cheaper, but I don't think that anything in our system is cheaper than 921 for Ground Advantage. So Happy says, I scheduled my first show. Congrats. What do you think of me selling some fabric, but also some handmade patch skirts? Which category would be the best to sell? Well, I mean, usually people who sell handmade put it in one of the handmade categories. If you're going to have a show that's just handmade, if you're going to do fabric and then show some of your patchwork skirts and try and sell them, just mix it in with the fabric, but list it as a handmade item. So it's a specific listing in a handmade category. Oh, shirts. Sorry. I looked at skirts. It's shirts. So yeah, so list it, as a handmade item and show pictures and everything and share them and maybe show your process if you're selling it with fabric. If you're selling just the shirts, it needs to be under a handmade category because, think about it this way. When you're selling fabric, you're selling to people who make stuff. Right? Are they necessarily going to buy your handmade items? Not necessarily, because they can make it themselves. But they might be interested in seeing how they're made, and maybe they would buy one as an example or, support you, but they're not your audience who will actually buy the shirts. So you want those in the handmade category, but you can mix it in. And there's a lot of people who do tutorials, who sell kits, who, and then mix it in with selling the supplies to make things. Yeah. The shirts will have vintage fabric patches. Cute. That sounds cute. Yeah, but it is tough to get people who already like to sew. It's tough to get them to buy your handmade items because they can make them themselves, or maybe would want to make it themselves, versus the audience who wants to buy your handmade unique items because they don't sew and don't want to make it themselves. If that makes sense. So you kind of have to explore both arenas, so to speak. And I'll be honest, handmade is tough here on Whatnot because um, we just don't have the automatic audience for it because Whatnot, isn't known for that. Can it be? Can you be successful? Yes. There's a lot of handmade sellers who are being very successful because they've built a business and built a niche, a niche, and they bring the customers to their shows because they are out there on social media showing the awesome stuff they make, and it brings an audience. So are you going to have an automatic audience on Whatnot? No. You're going to have to, find them elsewhere and bring them here for fulfillment. So it's just not, Whatnot is not out advertising handmade like some other platforms. So you have to kind of drum up your own business. But we have a lot of successful sellers who, already had a following or who have brought a following. Yes, doing demos, like Faye is saying, is really awesome for handmade because a lot of people just like to come and watch how to make something. And then a lot of times they'll buy it, or they will buy a kit, or, they'll just be excited to learn from you. And maybe you can sell patterns, kits, supplies, um, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right, welcome in. Please read the show notes. And if you have any questions, put them in chat with a question mark. So if you did ask or comment on something that I missed, it was probably because it didn't have a question mark. So put a question mark, even if it's not really a question. All right, let's talk about, let's see. So Happy says, I wonder if I should make the big vintage patches iron on, and then folks could sew on their shirt. That's a brilliant idea. Just, get a bunch of the nice heat and bond stuff, send it to them with the paper still on there, show them, either show them on the live how to do it, or send a little sheet with instructions, and then they get the cool patches and they can pick their own shirt that they get to put them on. Yeah, I love that idea. That's great. And I think you could probably sell those in both, a handmade and or a fabric show, both. Because that's another thing. Because technically, if you're just selling the patches that you've pre-made and you're selling them to crafters, you can get an audience that will, do lots of different things. Junk journalers, sewers, quilters, just depends on, and then all the upcycle clothing people that like to do that. My goodness, would you recommend anyone can join giveaways or just for followers? If you open it up for everyone, it does allow then people who are international to enter, and you might end up spending a ton of money on sending giveaways to international customers, and that can get really spendy. So followers is probably the safest bet because they just follow you, but they're not necessarily an international customer. Yeah. Good morning, Trish. How are you today? So, I mean, if you are trying to get an international audience, now is just not a good time because with the tariffs and everything going on around the world, shipping outside of the US is crazy expensive. Crazy. Like I opened up one of my shows. This was years ago, and I was selling some doll stuff. And you know how tiny little Barbie shoes are? They weigh nothing, but you do have to put them in some kind of little container. I gave away Barbie shoes, and I had to send some to someone in Canada. It cost me $14 to send free Barbie shoes. So I was like, dang. Yeah. So probably not worth it. And that was before the tariffs were even worse. So now it would probably cost me $30 because it's just a base, rate to send something. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. All right. So, on in the show notes, it refers you to the Whatnot Seller account. I just want to show you what is scheduled out there. So the official Whatnot Seller account. Why is it not coming up? Did I spell it wrong? Oh yeah, I spelled it wrong. Let's try and spell it right. So Whatnot Sellers. Oh my goodness. All right, so on that schedule, the 20th, they're going to talk about new product updates and features. And then Julie Becker is going to do shipping on the 27th on this account. And she's got even more stuff than I have. And she's good to, because she sells clothing. So anyone that sells clothing, she is going to be probably the expert, in-house expert on how to pack and ship clothing the most accurately for, how to set up your custom profiles. Because a lot of the clothing sellers now are using custom profiles where it allows, and they tell people right up front, your first 7 items or whatever are going to be $9.21. And then if you might buy more than that, then it restarts a new box. Because it was just getting crazy for them to try and offer reduced shipping above and beyond that, because depending on, whether you sell it, women's clothing, men's clothing, kids' clothing, sweaters, jackets, the heavier stuff during that season, you can usually fit 1 or 2, So they figured out, a coat will fill up a whole box, so they are using custom profiles to limit the number of items per box. And they're very transparent up front in the show notes. They tell people, your first 5, your first 3, your first 7, whatever number they figured out works the best for them, will be, $9.21 max, and then it flips to a new box. So, yeah, and if you're having a show where you're selling boots or coats or something like that, then it's 1 per box. And people understand, if you go on another platform and where things aren't bundled like they are on Whatnot, you pay shipping per item usually. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a discount if you buy 2 from the same seller, but that's usually limited. So yeah. So she's going to be on there on the 20, what did I say it was? The 27th, and doing a shipping show, and she has lots of good stuff. So, and like I said, if you want to message me, because I had that link in my show notes and then somehow I didn't manage to get it in for today. Let me see if it's on the one I have on. No, because it was a new link I added. Anyway, it's a link that I can send you. So just message me if you want it. And it gives you a link that takes you to all the community support shows that are going to talk about shipping this month. So you'll be able to go in and bookmark them. Because I think it really helps to get a bunch of different sellers' perspectives on how they do shipping, because everybody sells different things and has different tips and ideas, based on what they sell. And you can really glean a lot of good tips from different perspectives on shipping. So, all right, let's see. Mother's Day. They did a free giveaway with each first purchase. Just a small random item. Is this good to get peeps shopping? Oh, you saw a seller do that. Honestly, that's against terms of service. Um, you're not allowed to require a purchase to get a giveaway. So although it sounds enticing, it's technically against terms of service, because giveaways are supposed to follow the legal sweepstakes rules, which means you have to make it available to everyone regardless of a purchase. Niall says, I just don't want to pay the difference, but I'm struggling with the weight of my tumblers. So yeah, Niall, you need to do custom profiles and they need to ship alone. How often does someone buy more than one? Because maybe you can have a custom profile for one and then a custom profile for two and make it a little bit less than having to spend, double shipping. But you need to use custom profiles to your advantage, and just be transparent, in your show notes and in the listings how it's going to ship. Because a custom tumbler, you got to really pack it nice and have it protected so it doesn't get all scratched up, so it doesn't get broken. And so people are paying for that. They're going to understand that, the shipping needs to be so that they're going to get it there safely. All right, let's see. So you have stainless steel, plastic, and glass. So yeah, especially in the glass ones, right? You're going to have to do some special stuff. So yeah, really focus on how can I use custom shipping profiles to help me get it really, narrowed to exactly what works for what I sell. A lot of people are discovering that works best, because Whatnot just provides the generic, weight ranges and here's how it can bundle things. But you have to be smart and figure out, based on what you sell, what's actually going to work. Trish is asking, do people buy old quilts that aren't in perfect condition? Yes. So they're called cutter quilts and they sell actually really well. Just list your show have some pictures on your thumbnail, put it in your title, cutter quilts for crafting, because that's a big deal right now with people buying old quilts to cut up and make jackets and make other things out of. So yeah, just be really, fully transparent of condition when you sell them. Make sure people don't think it's a quilt they're going to be able to, put on a nice bed. So it's a cutter quilt. So yeah. Like you can do the same thing with vintage linens. You can have what are called cutter lots, where you have a bunch of cool vintage linens, but they're not in condition for, actually putting on your table, but they have really cool embroidery or lace or neat linen or whatever, and people can cut them up and use them to make other things. People love that too. So having cutter lots of vintage linens is a thing. Yeah, definitely sell those as a lot, because if they're not in good enough condition that you would want to put it out on display, but people can take those and make other things out of them. They want a bunch of them all together, so it makes it worth their buying them, because buying stuff like that individually is not cost effective if you're using it to remake items. Welcome in. Thanks for joining. Please read the show notes. And yeah, please have, if you're looking for shipping help, make sure you have my show for Friday morning bookmarked. I'll be in front of the camera and I'll have all the boxes out. And I'm just going to walk you through kind of how to determine what shipping settings are going to work best for you based on what you sell. And I'll come from the perspective of fabric and crafts because that's what I sell. But, it's a basis for anyone to really be able to think it through. And a big deal right now is that Whatnot has announced that starting in a couple of months, sellers are going to have to be responsible for any adjustments on packaging when you send it either underweight. No, wait, that's the wrong weight. You sell it over, or you send it over the weight that the label says. So, like if you have a label that says it's supposed to be 8 ounces and then you send it and it's actually 13, previously Whatnot was paying the difference. The post office was keeping track, hey, this package has a label that says it's 8 ounces. It's actually 13. You owe us $1.25 or whatever it is. And Whatnot was covering that for all of us. And they've just grown too much. That's becoming too expensive. We need to, tighten the belt to speak, so to speak, and be more accurate with how we're sending stuff out. So you're going to start getting charged if you don't have accurate weights. So where does that start? Well, it starts with making sure that when you sell something, the way that you've listed that item is accurate for how it needs to ship. And then on the back end, when you go to ship items, don't just print the label and slap it on the box. You need to make sure what it actually weighs now that, because if they bought more than one item, it could be slightly different. So you need to, make sure on the back end. So the 5 adjustments are more for, unbundling. They bought too much stuff. I have to change package types because of some reason, it's too fragile. I'm going to go from, this type of label to a different type of label. So that's more of what your 5 free adjustments are for. And I don't think those are going away. I haven't heard that those are going away. But I'm talking about the adjustments that the post office is keeping track of. So when you send a package, they're pretty, when it reaches their regional center, their equipment measures and weighs that package and it's noted on the tracking what in their system. So they know how much that box weighed and what the dimensions of it were when they got it. So there's another thing about that, which is if someone receives their package and opens it and claims that it's empty or that the stuff is missing, the post office actually knows what it weighed when they got it, and it knows what it weighs when it's delivered. And they can look at the difference and go, oh, yep, something got stolen out of it. Or nope, this is what it weighed originally. This is what it weighed when it got to you. So if the seller can prove that everything was in there, then the buyer's trying to scam you and claim something was missing. So they actually have all that technology. But what I'm saying is you have a label that says, 8 ounces. It actually was 13. They track that and they charge it back to the shipping provider who for years now, Whatnot has been covering those adjustments no longer. So you got to send it out accurately. So on the back end, you need to use the web version of the software you need to weigh and put in dimensions on anything but flat rate so that it is accurately sent. Okay. Don't just print the label and go, because it might not be accurate and you're going to get charged. So I saw personally some sellers who, when they got that notification about Whatnot's going to start charging, it showed you what your previous month's adjustments would have been. I saw some sellers who it was over 500 or more dollars. So that really would chew into your profits, wouldn't it? So some of the bigger sellers, it's a lot of money, and they've really had to take a second look at how they're shipping and make sure they're fixing that so that it's not going out inaccurately. And another thing is making sure that what label you put on there matches the type of packaging. So if it's a priority, the label needs to say priority. If it's a priority flat rate, the label needs to say that it's a flat rate and which box it is, because you choose that right off the menu. If it's ground advantage, the label needs to be ground advantage, and it needs to be in your own packaging. You cannot send a priority or a priority flat rate box with a ground advantage label on it. Okay. All right. There were some big sellers that were telling people to make everything one weight and not worry about it, and that you get 5 adjustments. Exactly, because Whatnot was picking up all the differences. Well, they're not going to anymore, so that's not going to work for them anymore, is it? So, yeah. Diane says, where do I go to print a packaging invoice to put inside the box I am shipping? So it's in the same place where you print your labels, but you need to be using the web version. On the mobile device, the only thing it prints is the label. So you need to go to the web version, and when you print, it will print both the packing slip and the label. So web version, seller hub, shipping, and then shipments, and then in your orders as you do each order. So you need to be using the web version to do your shipping. Okay. Let's see. Yes, definitely better for the customer that you always have everything at the most accurate weight for shipping. So if you need to use custom profiles, use them. Figure it out. Make sure you're doing your best to provide the most accurate weight for shipping. And we will go over that again in my show on Friday. So Friday morning, I'm going to have all the boxes out. I'm going to walk you through the whole process of deciding what's going to work for you for shipping. And I will show you the screens on the web version where you need to be using those to ship. It really is, because mobile, all you can do is print the label. You don't go in and change the weights or the dimensions on the mobile device that just prints out labels. And so if you're just printing the label, you have no idea if that's accurate. So yes, use a web browser, not the app on your phone. So use a laptop or a PC to do your shipping. Do you think they will ever have a feature where if too much postage was charged to the buyer, you could adjust it so the buyer would get a refund? Honestly, in a Violet world, I don't think so. Because the way this platform works, you shouldn't be overcharging. So it does smart bundling. And if you're doing, anything 1 to 5 pounds is a flat rate already of $9.21. So there's nothing that would be overcharged, right? So the only scenario I can really see is if someone is doing their settings at 1 to 5 pounds priority, 5 pounds and over ground advantage, and they put way too much weight on the item and it way overcharged. Whatnot will, you can message customer service. So if you really screwed up and, like, for example, maybe you typoed and put, you had a custom profile or something and you put 15 ounces and and you accidentally put pounds instead of ounces, and then it way overcharged them a ground advantage fee. You could advocate for the customer, message, show them your mistake, and most likely they would refund the customer. That's a case by case. Are they ever going to automate it where you, as the seller, can go in and request them to refund a buyer some shipping? Probably not. Because I know that's how it works on the Bay. You can go in and say, oh, whoops, it overcharged them. Can you refund? Put in a refund. I know it does that on Etsy too. But the way Whatnot works, I doubt that will ever be an option just because, everything is bundled by the software and it's on you, the seller, if you didn't put in accurate weight. So, yeah, I think you need to just really focus on, let's see, for example, I sell postcards and photos, and if I put it in the 1 to 3 ounce range and they buy 20, that weight only 3, but label says 60. So use a custom profile and do, 0 to 1 instead. And then they're going to have to buy 16 before it hits that pound. Or you can even do less than that. If you create a custom profile, you can do, 0.05 ounces as the weight. And if you're sending them in envelopes or stiff mailers, it starts out charging the envelope rate if you can put them in envelopes. But probably if they're vintage, you're probably not wanting to do, you want tracking, right? So yeah, I would do a custom profile at 1/2 ounce. And then that way they could buy at 1/2 ounce, it wouldn't max out to a pound until they've bought, let's do the math for me. I can't math while I'm walking. But you see what I'm saying? Yeah, on a custom profile, you can do less. So that's what I'm saying. Use a custom profile. So, like, I have a custom profile I use for when I do fat eighths, because I sometimes do a fat eighth game where you get to pick two, and I have it as a custom profile at just exactly 1 ounce so that they can buy up to 16 before it hits the pound. Yeah, so they'd have to buy like 30 to make it a pound, but once they hit 30, you probably do want it at a pound because then you could use like a small flat rate box and it's going to be a nice little box and then they get free shipping. Yeah, exactly. So that works. All right. Let me think about other things that we need to talk about. So if you have questions or comments that you want me to read, please put them with a question mark so they show up bold. Yeah, definitely do a custom profile for those. So that will help a lot because then people will not be as, they'll realize they're getting a lot for their value on the shipping. Yeah. Okay, so in the show notes, the third star bullet in the show notes takes you to selleracademy.whatnot.com. So any of you listening that are, thinking about selling or just got signed up, please, I'm begging you, go to the Seller Academy and go through all the little tutorials because it just walks you through all the basics of being a seller on Whatnot. Teaches you how to, set your show up. It teaches you, the different buttons and how you navigate things. Teaches you the basics of shipping. It just goes through all the basics. So that's the third star bullet. It's selleracademy.whatnot.com. It's not super detailed. They had to write it to the lowest denominator to make it, generic for everyone, but it does walk you through all the basic stuff and helps you learn just how to use Whatnot. And then you can go out, and come to these kind of seller chats and ask more specific questions, get into more detailed things. But really, that Seller Academy also has lots of links to get you into some more detailed stuff. I mean, Whatnot has done a really good job, in my opinion, of providing sellers with a lot of education. I've been in some of the Whatnot seller shows before, and you'll have people in the comments be saying stuff like, why don't you teach us how to use the app better? Why don't you this? Why don't you that? And I'm like, people, are you not even paying attention to your emails? When you first sign up to sell, they send you all kinds of emails with links saying, go do this, go do that, and people just don't even bother to read, or they're not even checking their email. They actually provide a huge amount of education, seller support, videos, tutorials that are out there for sellers to learn how to use the platform. So it kind of pisses me off, honestly, when you see people complaining about it's so hard to learn how to do this. It's so hard to do this. Well, did you even go and read and look and see what's out there? Probably your emails got trained to go to junk. So you've got to check your junk and spam and see if your Whatnot emails are going there, because you should be getting them to the email address that you signed up on your account. So if you're not, message customer service and have them double check, because you should be getting emails and you should be getting things like, updates, promotions. And when you're brand new, they send you, a bunch of emails about where to go get help, how to use Seller Academy, incentives that you can get as a new seller if you, have shows and do certain things within certain time frames. They'll actually give you some cash match. They'll promote some of your shows. It changes from time to time, so I can't, verbally tell you exactly what those are. But yeah. So if it's not in junk, then oh yeah, Dolls Closed by Vicky, you're still having problems with that. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on with that. Because I think what happened is you signed up with one email, signed up with a different one, had your account, you had to redo some stuff, right? So somewhere in the mix, it got all mixed up. So yeah. You need to message and say, hey, I really need emails from you. Make sure you have the right email address on my account. Because it may be that you had one and tried to, change your password, reset things, and it got mixed up. So that can happen. All right. Welcome in, everybody. How's your Tuesday going? Hope you're having a good start to your week. And another reminder that we are entering what is called the summer slowdown. So typically for most sellers in most categories, summer is a slower sales season. So make sure that you are aware of that and don't get too discouraged if sales shows everything is slowing. It's the normal cycle. So it is the slower time, just typically. Some sellers, depending on the category they sell in, it's pretty even. But with reselling, there's always ups and downs. It's a roller coaster ride. Make sure you're, you know, okay to ride that roller coaster. So, yeah, you'll just have to keep messaging them, Vicky, because just keep bugging them and stay on the same email thread. So every time you message them, stay on the same thread because then they can see the history of you messaging back and forth and they'll figure it out eventually. Someone just needs to go into your account and update all the settings. And you just need to make sure on your end that you're giving them the accurate information. It also can sometimes have to do with your email carrier. If for some reason that got blocked initially, then no matter what you do, if it got blocked, you may have to message your email carrier and reset something that got blocked. That can happen too. So yeah, slower sales time of the year. You will notice, people are out doing yard work, doing other things, going on vacations, have family reunions, family events, graduations, all that good stuff. We're all doing that good stuff. Um, use your creativity to come up with more curated special shows that get people's attention. Use the time to get organized, to get cleaned up, to get, to prepare for future shows. Have shows on your schedule that people can bookmark out that are exciting coming up. Do all those kinds of things to really help during the slower time. And yeah, if you have questions, put them in chat with a question mark. I will try to answer and respond best I can. Make sure you check in my shop. So you go in the shop and then the auction tab, there are just all kinds of informational listings that you can screenshot the information in there, go through them, get lots of info and tips and tricks and things, ideas that you can do. I have a couple in there that are proprietary to me. This is one of them. My top 10 tips for sellers. It's just a really good checklist of am I doing all these things? Because these are all the basic things you should be doing as a seller to make sure that you are set for consistent growth and success. And then the other one that I have in here that is proprietary to me is this one. I just think it really puts it into a really focused 5 things that can really help you think and brainstorm. Am I doing all the right things to be successful on this platform? Because this platform, although you may be here because you are exploring a new way that you can sell and ultimately make money, yes, that's your first and foremost reason for being here. You have to recognize that Whatnot is just as much social media and community as it is about selling. And so you have to fulfill as a seller, when you have shows, you have to be fulfilling those other aspects of selling and Whatnot, or you're not going to really have success. So your shows have to be not just about selling, they have to be fun. People have to want to be there, they have to want to stay there. You have to do your shows at a fast enough clip to keep people's attention. You have to have the right kind of stuff because it's not just about selling that one individual item. You can go on other platforms and search for that item that you want and buy it. On Whatnot, it works differently. people still know how to do the search and find and buy, but we don't do a really good job of providing the search and find and buy experience because people are focused on doing shows. So you need to have enough search, find, buy items to get people to find you, but you also need to have the show experience where they come in and they enjoy being there. They come back because it's all part of being entertained while at the same time being able to buy the items that they are passionate about and love and that you are passionate about selling. So it's a whole experience versus just going out there. I need paper clips. I go to Amazon, I search paper clips. I find the ones that are the right size and the price and the style I like. Boom, buy. Whatnot is a whole different experience. But it starts with people search, find, because that's how people are trained to use other apps. That's our mentality. When we go to a shopping site, what is the first thing we do? We type something in the search bar. Well, people do the same thing on Whatnot, and honestly, they don't find a whole lot. So, because we don't do a good job of listing things. So, make sure you're listing some things so that people can find you the organic search way as well as, categorically finding shows under the different categories as they are live. So, we lose a lot of new customers who don't get how the app works. They come in expecting it to be like other shopping sites where you can just search for something, find it, what you want, and then possibly buy it if you find the one you want. And then when they don't understand that when they search and they aren't finding anything, it's because that's not how Whatnot works. But we need it to work both ways so people can actually find things and want to stick around. So it is as much a social experience as it is a shopping experience. So you have to recognize that and do both so that people can A, find you in the first place, and then B, want to stick around. Does that make sense? Am I going in circles? So yeah, it's, you just have to recognize that and do all the things you need to do to make it work for you. Let's see, my opinion on how long show titles should be. Whatnot does not limit the number of words in the title, so we utilize more words? Yes. It doesn't limit, but it's limited just by the fact that it only displays so much of it. So experiment with that and put as much as you can in there, but think about the impact words that are going to bring people to your show. So an impact word is a type of product, a pricing, a strategy, um, a catchy thing. So think about going on YouTube, and if you're scrolling YouTube, what catches your eye is the pictures, but also the words. And the YouTubers that are successful have become masters at using catchy titles that draw you in. Now, do we learn that some of them are 100% just that clickbait? Yes, but you need to think clickbait in your mind too, just have it be authentic. So your title and your thumbnail need to draw people in, but it does need to be authentic because because you're building trust for people to want to come back. So, if you want that clickbait mentality, I'm going to click on this show because look at this amazing title and look at this thumbnail. It's subconscious. They're not actually thinking that. It's just an instantaneous, ooh, what's this? Squirrel, squirrel, what's this show? look at this title, look at this thumbnail. I'm going to click and see what it is. And then make sure your show is what your title and your thumbnail reflect. Does that make sense? Because you're building trust, you're building an audience, you're building a following. You want them to come back over and over. So be authentic, but also use the grab to get people in. So the grab words like the pricing, the what you're going to sell that people should be excited about because it's a trendy item, the pictures you have on your thumbnail. And honestly, on thumbnails, the picture needs to say most of it. Don't put too many words on your thumbnail, because the less, because if you have too many words on there, it gets too busy. People can't really see what it's all about. They just see a bunch of words and it's like, whatever, move on. So the less wordy you get on a thumbnail, the better. Use your title to grab with the way the title is worded, but use your thumbnail to give the visual, because sometimes that's all you need is what's on your thumbnail. Does that make sense? But yeah, you don't have a limit, but it does cut it off depending on how many. So just when you look at how you have your title, if it's cutting it off in a way that looks stupid, change it. You know, change it so it's not mid sentence on something in the title, cutting it off, because that looks weird. So use those to your advantage. And yeah, people are all about, the way the world works now, it's all about the visual. You see that thumbnail, you don't even sometimes look at the title of the show, because that thumbnail is what's drawing you in. But your title can have some grab words, just like they use on YouTube. It'll say something like, "You won't believe what I saw." Oh, really? And then you see the thumbnail of the picture, and they're looking in some deep dark hole or some mystery closet, or it draws you in. So use that same kind of mythology to draw people in, but have it be authentic to what you're doing. Does that make sense? All right. Welcome in. If you're just joining, please read the show notes. And if you have questions, put them in chat with a question mark so they show up in bold. Let me make sure I haven't missed any. Let's see. Whatnot search needs to pull from the show titles. It would help a lot. Let me think about that. Yes, pretty much search is limited to, your usernames and your categories and then a specific item. But you're right. I don't think it really searches from the title. But how would that, give me an example of where that would be helpful? Because if you already have things listed in the correct category, and you have, actual listings, not just generic listings, they're going to be able to search and find that show. Whereas, what could you possibly put in a title that would be useful for them to search by? I'm kind of confused by that. But I kind of see what you're saying. It would be nice if someone came in and searched a specific brand or whatever, and in addition to products, it also showed them shows that have that in the title. Oh, you looked for flannel, and I had to look for show titles that said flannel. It wouldn't sort that for you. Okay, yeah, I see. I can see what you're saying there. Yeah, that would be nice in fabric category. If you could search by title. Because we do, people will do a curated show and they're going to do all silk or all flannel or all, double brush poly or, whatever. And that way people could search it and bookmark those upcoming shows. That's actually not a bad suggestion. People have asked, can we have additional categories that are more specific to that? But the problem with that is if you get too narrow. So the way the algorithms work, so when someone first joins the app, it has them go in and select categories they're interested in, right? And if they didn't select, if they're just selecting the main category, you want them to be able to see all shows in that category, not just the narrowing down to, like, if someone selected only lace, it would never show them anyone doing anything else in the broader categories, because the way the algorithms work, it shows people the shows in the categories that they selected. And it's hard for them. It actually really doesn't show them a whole lot outside of that, unless you do things to cross categories and go, do raid trains that are maybe in a different category, and then people find you. But it shows them shows they've bookmarked is the number one thing it shows them first. And then it shows them things that are in the categories they've selected. So it's pretty limiting, and so you can't narrow your categories down too much, because then it would limit what people see. Does that make sense? So yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. That might be helpful if it's sorted by category, or if it's sorted by titles. It would pick up keywords in people's show titles and then show them shows that have that in the title. I can definitely send that as something for them to look at and think about doing. So let me take a screenshot of that. Sorry, I'm on here scrolling. Let's see. So that I'll remember. Okay, I'm just going to take a screenshot of that really quick. Because that, they could definitely look into thinking how that might work. It does help to have specific things in your buy it now, because when people do a search for a specific item, if you have actual listings, they will find you because you had a listing that met that criteria. So it's super important to have listings. There needs to be one button to start all the flash sales. Yes, there does. And that's been requested multiple times. We'll see if they can make it happen. So yes, we all want that, so that you don't have to sit there and individually start each flash sale. I personally have requested that multiple times. So yeah. And how are you today, by the way, Jerry? Welcome in. All right, let's see what time it is. Yeah, I need to get going here pretty quick. So, what is the point of pinning a product? The point of pinning a product is so that two things actually. When you pin something, if people have bookmarked that item, they actually get a notification that you're getting ready to run that item. And the other reason is people can see the shipping cost before you run it. Because when you have it pinned on the screen, it shows them, what it's going to cost for shipping before you run it. Hey, Papa's Painting with the raid. Thank you so much for the raid. Let's check out Papa's Paintings. Let's give them a follow. And everyone, please click on their name and view their profile with me. So Papa's Paintings is Jonathan, and he says, I started painting in 2018 because my granddaughter asked me to help her learn how to paint. So we watched Bob Ross. Aw, good old Bob Ross. And now I'm hooked and hoping to use this to help retire. Thank you for watching. And so you go live and paint on your shows. I'm assuming that's cool. And we have a couple of sellers doing that. I love the idea. It is tough to get an audience in anything artistic and handmade, but if you do some creative things and make it fun, you will definitely get an audience. So, can everyone help Jonathan out and bookmark those upcoming shows? Um, and thank you so much for bringing us your raid. All right. So, thank you for that. What was I talking about before that? Oh, I was talking about the pinning of product. So yeah, those two reasons. Pinning it so people get notified you're about to run it, and pinning it so they see it on the screen and know you're about to run it and see the shipping cost. All right. Poshmark has a new thing with USPS, and they offer brown poly mailers for Ground Advantage. Do you think Whatnot might offer that in the future? I mean, it's possible. The reason Poshmark, that I understand, went that direction is that now everything is just Ground Advantage for them, and they negotiated a special rate and have that poly mailer they can use for Ground Advantage. It just because they went Ground Advantage, they felt like their sellers would be kind of upset because they could no longer get free shipping supplies because they weren't going to do priority anymore. So they made that, new poly mailer. And by the way, those are specific to Poshmark. You should not be using those if you're a Whatnot seller. So those poly mailers that they offer for free to Poshmark sellers were specific to Poshmark. So you shouldn't be trying to source those and use them for Whatnot packaging. And I have seen people saying that they've done that. Probably those are getting caught, and you're going to get a chargeback on that. The post office says you can use them for any platform. Picking with Peggy says. Well, I haven't heard that. I would be careful with that because you definitely don't want to, pick those up and start using them on Whatnot and then have them charging back that now that they're going to pay attention to that, to Whatnot, and claim, you're using these Ground Advantage packaging for your sellers are starting to use these with a SHPO label. We didn't make that agreement, and then they start charging you back at a higher priority rate, because right now with Whatnot, in order to use the free packaging, it has to be priority or priority flat rate, correct? So I would be careful about that. Let's see. So what Jen says, I only heard about it from the USPS lady. I think she assumed I was shipping clothes from there. Oh, yeah. So yeah, if she made that assumption, then, yeah. But I would be really careful with that picking with Peggy, because it could be a nightmare if you started using them and then got charged back the difference between Ground Advantage and Priority, because Whatnot doesn't have that same agreement. So yeah, I'd be very careful with that. I can ask Whatnot, but as far as I know, yeah, officially that would be only for Poshmark. Well, again, the post office might have given you some, but did you specifically tell them, I don't sell on Poshmark, I sell on Whatnot? So I don't know. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, everyone used to have to pay for priority, even if it was a pair of earrings. Yeah, exactly. So, yes, and they said anyone can use them. Hingy patterns. Oh, was what not down this morning earlier? Yeah, I'll ask, but yeah, I don't know for sure, but I would assume that if it was something, oh, it was completely down. Oh, so have I been chatting and oh, it crashed during your show? Oh dear. So mine never crashed, so that's weird. I've been yakking and yakking here this morning, have no crash. Huh, maybe it depended on when you went live. So, interesting. 6:28 a.m. Pacific. Because I went on at 7:45 Mountain, which would have been, let's see, you were on at 8 Central. It went down around 8:30 Eastern. Huh. I could not long on. Yeah, I don't know. I went live 7:45 a.m. Mountain time, and I've been on here since. So I obliviously was just live, and yeah, my chat was working. I haven't noticed that it wasn't. I don't know. Was anyone on here the whole time? Has anyone been here the whole time that I've been on? That's in here still? Because it never dropped for me. How do you use free boxes here? So you have to use the ones that the post office provides that are priority or priority flat rate. Oh, it did crash earlier for like 15 minutes. It was down at that time in your zone. Yeah, weird, because I went live, people joined. I never noticed anything. So I don't know. Maybe people were already logged in stayed. Yeah, possibly, huh? Strange. Very strange. And maybe they have different servers in different locations. Most businesses do. And maybe there was one server down in a certain area, but it was still okay somewhere else. I don't know. Very strange. All right. I do need to get going. So if you need help with shipping and want to know all the different shows that are going to talk about shipping, message me after this show and I'll send you the link. What it is a link that will automatically show you all the shows scheduled with community hosts that are going to be talking about shipping the rest of the month. And bookmark my show for Friday morning because that's what we're going to talk about. I'll show you all the boxes. We'll go through how to set up your shipping settings based on what you sell. Gives you some tips about custom shipping profiles, all that good stuff. How to unbundle, how to what else? Where you can just see different things on the screen. I'll, take you through all of that. And let's go find someone to raid. And thank you so much for spending some of your time, even if I didn't realize the app was crashed for some people. All right, so here we go. Let's go find someone to raid into. Thrift Shop Cards is on in the community category right now. They're the sellers that create the thrift shop trading cards, which I just got mine the other day. I'm going to get them loaded. Let's go right into that show. And thanks everyone for all you do and for being here. And we'll see you around. See you later. Thanks everyone.